I'm pretty good at punching things and a fair hand at first aid. I even know how to build new bedroom furniture and repair a leaky pipe, but I'm not well trained at helping children deal with emotional trauma. Dianne Mahoney is, and she puts that training and knowledge to work with her Imagine project, a book series and visualization technique, which we talk about today. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, and do come find us on Facebook or sign up at Patreon for early access and members only goodies. Thanks for watching. Now let's get to work. I'd like to introduce you all to two close personal friends of the show. John and John are a pair of law enforcement officers with 3 decades of combined experience in helping people stay safe and what happens when that fails. They've built a shop, Shield Protection Products, that offers a full range of self-defense items like pepper spray and stun guns that real people can use in the real world. They're like-minded folks, so they also offer important safety equipment like fire extinguishers, medical kits, and car escape tools. They provide an instructional video with every purchase so you know how to use anything you buy. Find them at shieldprotectionproducts.com and use the discount code SFOTB10 to get 10% off of your purchase. That's SFOTB10 at shieldprotectionproducts.com. Seriously, friends, if you're looking for the best equipment to keep your family safe, along with advice from knowledgeable professionals on how to use it, while supporting this show and a small business that deserves it, you'll find it at Shield Protection Products. Go check them out and tell them Safest Family on the Block sent you. Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and with me today is Dianne Maroney. Hello, Dianne.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How about your own self?
I'm great. Thank you very much.
Good, good, good. And Dianne comes to us today via the Imagine Project, which is an organization that gives kids and teens and adults the opportunity to work through difficult life circumstances through expressive writing. And Dianne herself is a clinical nurse specialist in psychiatric and medical and mental health nursing. She's the founder of the Imagine Project, and she has written the book, The Imagine Project, Empowering Kids to Rise Above Drama, Trauma, and Stress. And I really appreciate you coming on today. In the self-defense and safety and protection industries, there's a lot of emphasis on, the physical self-defense, the martial arts, situational awareness, but mental health is such an important part of keeping our families safe. And then, depression, anxiety, suicide, bullying, all of those things are such an important safety topic. And I really appreciate the Imagine Project for existing and you for coming on today. So can we start a little bit? Tell us, what is the Imagine Project?
Thank you. So the Imagine Project is, like you said, an expressive writing tool. There's that helps kids process stress and trauma by using the word imagine. So the word imagine starts every sentence, and it helps them to process, anything from their mom or dad, yelled at them, to more serious issues, some sort of death, goes the whole spectrum. And it does that. So we have 4 journals on the website. We're a nonprofit, and we've to date reached almost 300,000 kids, which is awesome. Our goal this year is 1 million. So we have 4 journals on the website. One's for kindy, and that follows the Imagine Project, or a children's book that I wrote called Byron the Caterpillar Who Loves to Imagine. And then there's a kids, a teen, and an adult journal. So it's for everybody, really, not just kids, but it's for everybody. And it's a 7-step process that helps kids, or that takes you through the process of, first of all, what do you love about your life, is the step 1. Step 2 is, what's been difficult in your life, like something that happened yesterday, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it doesn't matter, that's still very present. And then step 3, you take something from step 2 that's been difficult in your life, and you write an imagined story about it. So imagine this happening in my life. You're expressing the occurrence through the word imagine. So say it was a child that had to move. So it would be something like, imagine loving the school you're at. Imagine having lots of friends. Imagine your mom and dad coming home and telling you had to move. Imagine being scared. Imagine being mad. Imagine being sad. And then imagine, then step 4 is to ask them, how do you want that story to end? What's the positive part of that possibility of that story? So then it might continue on to imagine getting to your new school. Imagine a friend's coming up and sitting down with you. Imagine finding new friends. Imagine loving your new teacher. Imagine loving where you live. So it helps them to kind of complete it and to see possibility versus getting stuck in the emotion of it. And then step 5 is taking your imagined dreams and making them I statements. I can be happy at this school. I will. It's I can, I will. I can, I am, I will. So I am happy at this school. I will be happy at this school. I can be successful here, sort of thing. Step 6 is what do you need to do to make your dreams happen? So they have to own the possibilities in their life and write down at least 3 things that they have to do, go to school, make friends, study, those kinds of things. And kids are pretty good about, saying what they need to do. And then step 7 is my favorite. It's a 30-day imagine gratitude kindness challenge. So every day you write down 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you want to imagine in your life, and do 1 act of kindness. So we know that gratitude changes brain function. So that's part of, we want them to appreciate life and to see the, the more positive side of life, to learn to do that. And then doing kindness is just, makes the world a better place. And then goal setting, imagine possibilities helps them to set goals, because we know goal setting helps people to achieve their goals. So that's the 7-step process. And
Wow.
it's the same for all 3 of the older, the kids, teen, and adult journals. And they're all free. You can download them for free at theimagineproject.org. So, yeah, that's the process basically.
Wow, I really like how that it begins with gratitude and ends with gratitude, and gives them a space to really discuss their fears and to put a name on the fear, because so often that dread and anxiety is when, well, something bad might happen, and even a conversation about, well, what specifically bad might actually realistically happen here, and even that conversation can minimize it and give you a sense of power over it.
Yeah,
and that's a really interesting process.
well, it can smolder there, if you've had something that happened to you a long time ago. There was a young man. He was in. I used to help with the track team at the local high school, and he was a young man, and he was a discus thrower, and he was trying to learn it. His coach was trying to teach him all the steps, and he just couldn't get it. He just had this kind of skipping the brain thing. He just couldn't download what he's supposed to do, even though he's a really good athlete. So I sat down with him and I was talking to him, and I said, so, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? He said, I have a good life, And I said, well, have you ever lost a dog or a grandparent? Nope, everything's intact. And I said, well, I said, so have you ever been bullied or anything? He goes, oh. And he remembered a time when he was like 8 years old, when he was learning to skateboard. And he was with a bunch of guys, a bunch of kids out in their yard or whatever. And he was trying to learn to skateboard, and he kept falling, and his friends were making fun of him and laughing. And I said, well, that's really interesting. Is that step similar to the steps you're supposed to learn with the discus throw? When, because the skateboarding step, it is. It's so similar. And so it was, and he started tearing up, actually, this big, athletic looking guy. And it was a memory that he had stuffed down that was still affecting his ability to do life. And in this instance, to do something that he really wanted to do. So, and it wasn't necessarily traumatic, but that day, what other people might consider traumatic, but that day was still sitting in his psyche, and it was affecting him, and it can do that. So when he had a chance to express it, then he was able to move through it and get past it. And he learned how to throw the discus. So,
Outstanding. That's very interesting. Are you familiar at all with the work of Tom Callis?
no, I'm not.
Tom Callis he's a martial artist who, for many years, he was one of the first people to introduce gratitude and acts of kindness into black belt requirements.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he's since retired and just making art in Idaho, but I sense that he would be a big fan of this project, and I'll probably point him to this video.
Yeah.
But tell me a bit about how did this start? Where did you get this idea from?
Well, it truly started when I was a child, because I went through a lot of trauma myself. You know, I had an alcoholic, abusive father, and my mom. I was in a gang. I don't look like I was in a gang, but I was. It wasn't the gangs of today. We didn't use guns and knives. We fought with our fists, and it's not something I'm particularly proud of, but it was taught me a lot. And I've just been through so much. And then when I was 15, I came home from school one day and found my mom after she committed suicide. So that was a huge trauma for me. And so all those experiences really kind of formulated how I understood myself in more of a negative way, really. And then fast forward many years, and I was married, and I am still married, but at the time I had a daughter who was born 4 months premature. She only weighed 1 pound 12 ounces. I was a preemie nurse. I worked in the NICU. And so I never really understood the trauma of prematurity until I had her. And I saw the trauma that she experienced. I felt my own trauma, kind of triggered a lot of old stuff for me. So I went back to school and got my master's in psychiatric mental health nursing. Started speaking about the trauma of prematurity to nurses and doctors. And I asked other preemie parents to tell me their story using the word imagine. It was an idea that I had. When I spoke, I would give them all this information, and then I would read these stories. And it was really impactful to, to hear their stories. So did that for a while. And then in 2010, I decided this is a really positive way to tell your story. So I ventured out in the world and started interviewing, traveled across the country, interviewing ordinary people with extraordinary stories, people who had overcome major instances, and asked them to write their story using the word imagine. Excuse me. And they did, and it was really powerful. So I created this big coffee table book, one of my first books. And then after the book was published, people said, wow, I feel better having written my story using this format. And people who read it felt inspired. And so I said, what else can I do with this? And then I asked a friend who was an 8th grade science teacher outside of Denver, where I live, if he could see if his kids could write imagine stories, because it's so important to get to kids early, and I needed it. So many people need it. And so he did. And out of a room of 28 kids, they talked about bullying, they talked about pressure from their parents, about neglect from their parents, loss. And then, but what was really eye-opening is that 3 kids talked about suicide and suicide ideation. So I thought, well, this is a window into kids' psyche. So I kept going, traveled all over the country, and not all over the country, but any place that would have me, working with all sorts of kids from homeless to affluent. And what I realized is that every child has a story. It's not just the at-risk kids. Every single child, it could be a kindergartner in an affluent neighborhood. It could be, an inner city kid. Of course, the stories get bigger the more exposure you have to trauma. But every child needs an opportunity to speak what's in their heart. And when they do, they transform, because they don't have it ingrained for 30, 40, 50 years like some of us adults. So they have the opportunity to heal quicker. So it's really cool to watch it happen.
I think it's important when children a chance to speak what's in their hearts, because one of my good friends uses the phrase little body, big emotions in a little body.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that we mistake a lot of parents can make is we know what stress looks like with our adult colleagues and our peers, but we don't really know what stress looks like in a child. I think some of us maybe are naive or not entirely informed about how much stress a child can be suffering under because they don't have the same stresses as adults. But you have a lot of experience in that range. What does stress look like in our elementary school kids, in our teens?
No, I think that's a really great question. And I think that, you know, the amount of stress, even before COVID, the research is showing that it was escalating. It was getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, that would be stressors maybe from too much pressure, too fast of a pace, you know, too much going on, sibling stuff, friend stuff, social media. There's just so many avenues for stress. And then COVID hit. So then it really bumped up, you know, a lot from COVID. And it's because they're losing their rituals. They're losing their self learning, their self-awareness by going to school and being with a new teacher and having new rules and new kids and forming those relationships. They've lost that. So it makes them feel a little bit lost themselves. So when they're stressed, they can be agitated, they can be hyperactive, they can be sad, they can't focus, they have a lack of empathy, they don't make good decisions, you know, they can regress. So one thing I really recommend is you learn human development. You learn what's appropriate for a 5-year-old, what's appropriate for a 10-year-old. And sometimes when they're under a lot of stress, they'll regress into a prior, you know, developmental stage. And then there's the physical symptoms. You know, you can have frequent illnesses, lots of headaches, lots of changes in their eating habits, sleeping habits. So stress can show up in a lot of different ways. And it's just really important to understand that we need to minimize stress, mitigate and minimize stress as much as possible, which is kind of hard to do right now. But because when kids are, you know, all the way through their early 20s, neural pathways are developing. We have new pathways, you know, learn how to ride a bike, we learn how to do math, we learn how to do lots of things. But those neural pathways need to know that need to be developed under calmer situations. Otherwise, the development turns into anxiety, turns into chronic issues, you know, mental health issues, because those neural pathways, you know, they're pretty much there for a long time, and it's hard to redirect them. You can, but it's hard to retrain those neural pathways. So it's very important. There's a hormonal impact. There's lots of impacts from stress that are hard on the body and the brain.
It seems like also one thing you described about how one of the responses in kids, especially to stress, is to act out. And then, of course, if we punish them for that, that increases the stress. So that becomes a downward spiral of stress and anxiety.
So punishment really only stops the behavior. It doesn't teach them to do something different. So punishment stops the behavior, but you want to do positive reinforcement to change the behavior. So yeah, parents, it's really hard to do. I mean, if the child's really acting out, the best thing you can do is love and listen. You know, sit down, try to calm yourself down, try not to get pulled into the scenario and get angry with them or upset with them. Calm yourself down, know that they're expressing themselves. It's what you do with babies. You got to do it all the way, you know, even with my adult children, I have to remember this. But you calm down and then you listen and you reflect. And if you do that, then they're going to calm down more, you know, more often than not. So it's hard. It's hard sometimes. I mean, parenting is tough. There's no booklet for it, really, you know. It's hard.
No, it is very hard. What you brought up actually reminds me, one of our earlier episodes was with Alex Bromley, who is a verbal judo instructor. And he came on to talk about communicating with kids. And he used a term that really applies here about being under the influence in conversation. If your spouse is drunk and they're starting to act in a certain way, you cannot speak to them like you would when they were sober. And people are under the influence of emotions.
Absolutely.
And so that your kid when they get riled up, if they're under stress, although you do have to have reasonable boundaries and expectations, but to engage them around that in that moment is
Right.
as useful as arguing with a drunk.
Exactly. And it really is. So sometimes just holding them, sometimes
Mhm,
just holding them, or even giving them a chance to sit next to you and calm themselves
mhm,
down, or saying, how and what sentences,
mhm,
how did that happen? What went on? How does that
mhm,
make you feel? I mean, it's sort of cliche, but it really does work. And it's hard to do, but if you practice, 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 you're not always
mhm.
going to do it right, but you can try to do it more often than not, hopefully.
Sounds like a communication both for our kids when they're having some stress issues and for ourselves about, okay, this didn't work this time as well as we'd hoped. What are we going to do different next time? Let's
Exactly.
forgive ourselves and move on.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Great, great thing.
Um, Now, the other side of that is if we do see our kids under stress, feeling the pain of a trauma, whether that's a serious trauma like a loved one or down to just to minor bullying, because
Mhm.
all of these can still add stress. This it's not a competition.
Right.
But we see that with our kids. What are some of the best things we can do? I mean, other than download a free copy of the Imagine Journal and get them to work.
Where I would begin. No.
So listen, if you've gotten this far into the show, you like what I'm doing here. So do I, but I need your help to make it all it can be. For just a dime a day, you can help this happen by supporting the show on Patreon. In return, you'll get my undying thanks, early access to episodes, a monthly safety worksheet, and other cool goodies. We're at patreon.com/safestfamily and waiting for your help. Please consider it. It's $3 a month to you, but a big deal to me.
That would be great. I think, like I said, I think what's really important as parents is to work on calming your own system. Work on when you're in the fight or flight, or you're rushed, or you're stressed, or life is chaotic. How can you step out of that and into a place that's calm? That's teaching your kids how to do it. So if they're in this destructive place and you get triggered into a major, place that's spiraling to, step back, let someone else take over. It depends on how critical it is. If you're not sure if you can just really be quiet in yourself at something, gather yourself and separate yourself from the child. But work on calming your system, meditation, focus, deep breaths, tapping. I love EFT. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but tapping, this is a great way to calm your system down, just like this. There's more to that, but this is a simple version. So practice that. So then when you're in a situation that's escalated, you can calm yourself down easier, I would say.
I feel like a lot of parents, there's some pushback about practicing communicating with your kids, practicing self-soothing, but at the same time, you practice for that speech to the board. You practice your 9-iron swing. You practice the things that are important to you. And
Exactly.
so taking the time to practice that conversation ahead of time, if it's, your teen is out late with the car again for the 10th time, it's very reasonable to practice in the mirror about, okay, what am I going to say to them? Well, I'm
Mhm.
not going to say that to them. That's what I want to say to them.
Yeah.
But instead, and having that practice.
I
And I love that you brought up meditation as well. It's a hugely powerful tool, whether it's tapping or a breathing meditation or mindfulness or gratitude meditation, in fact. Any of those can really help in that moment.
And even listening to something in the car, you're driving
Mhm,
from picking them up, calming
mhm,
music, calming
mhm,
something that you can download, it's really important. I mean, you're practicing for the most important job you've had in your life, you'll ever have in
mhm,
is parenting. And yet we have minimal preparation unless we have really good parents, which, not a lot of us do. So it's really important. You just have to practice. And you don't always get it right, but there's nothing that can't
mhm.
be undone, but you have to work at it to
Yeah.
make So,
And you also mentioned something in passing that I think it's good for people to hear, that it is absolutely okay, as long as there's no physical danger, for the parent to say very honestly, especially to teens, okay, listen, I am too mad right now to have a productive conversation with you about this. I'm going to take 10 and then we're going to sit down. It's completely okay to do that. And I think a lot of parents feel like they can't.
yeah. Or they lose themselves in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and they literally can't because they're so
Mm-hmm.
into it. But if you can have some sort of
Mm-hmm.
mental awareness that, okay, it's time for me to stop, then it would be fantastic. So helpful for your kids, so helpful for you and your relationship, and there'll be less regret later, less
Yeah.
regret.
And it also models a healthier way of dealing with it when you're very angry with somebody you love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that happens. It happens in every relationship. Yeah.
The more you love them, the more they can piss you off, and that's just an
It
unfair fact of human life.
is kind of true. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to take just a second to do a shameless plug. We have one of our skills and drills video on a meditation called square breathing, which is taught to police and military as a way of calming yourself down when you're in or about to enter a firefight. So if it can work for you under that level of stress, it can work for you when you're kind of pissed off at your teenager.
I've heard about that. Can you explain
Mhm.
it really quick?
It's really simple. Inhale for a count of 4 or 5, depending on your lung capacity. Hold your breath for a count of 4 or 5. Exhale for the same count. Then hold your breath for the same count. Do that in like 3 repetitions, and it is, in my experience, for me personally, the quickest way to just kind of reset everything and be able to step out and look at your emotions. Your mileage may vary. I have a number of friends who find tapping to be amazingly powerful, but it's a very simple way. And then I like to add from Thich Nhat Hanh's meditation practice that whenever you exhale, make yourself smile, because by the third exhale, it will be a genuine smile.
Lovely. With kids, I've heard of the square breathing, and with kids, they actually have them visualize a square. So
Okay, yeah.
breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So it's very helpful to have something visual for kids. So I think you can again, practice it with your child so that you can have it there when you need it. When they're going in to try out for something, they're going to have a big game, or they're going to have a big test, or they're not sure if they're going to be received in school well, do that before they get out of the car. It's just a perfect thing to set. Setting up your day by doing that, or a scenario by doing that. You talked about the dad or the mom that's waiting for their child that's coming home late. Do the square breathing before when they pull up, start doing it, or when they're going to be there, start doing the square breathing. And that's when the preparation, and it just flows so much better. If a child walks in the door and they can feel your energy is going to hammer them, you're not going to get anywhere, nowhere.
Yeah.
But if they feel like, you sincerely are scared and you're sincerely afraid for this scenario, then they're going to feel a little bit easier in the scenario to talk to you about it.
Yeah, and they'll feel more like it's like they're on your team.
Yes.
It's not you against me, it's you and me against the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sounds like
sometimes
yeah, Jason.
I do my very best. I've been fortunate enough to have learned from a lot of very, very smart people.
That's good.
I'm just smart enough to recognize smart people and listen to them carefully.
Nice. Very good quality.
We're all just doing our best.
That's right. Yeah.
So on the topic of stress, right now we are recording a year into the COVID pandemic, which, especially for young kids, change is stressful. Always. And for younger kids, change is even more stressful because they rely so much more on the rituals and the stability, and they just haven't experienced as much change as us. Once you start looking at 50, 60, you've had so many things change and you can pretty much take it in stride. Absolutely. But And then on top of all this change with different schooling, parents are home, parents are not home, a whole different change to their paradigm and the basic rhythms of their existence. There's this overhanging dread of a global pandemic, which especially the little ones may not understand fully beyond just we should all be very afraid. What are what are some things that we're seeing? What are some ways to cope with that COVID stress, especially right now?
Well, I think, keeping as much of the rituals as you can. And don't change them. Don't sit down in front of the TV to eat dinner if you used to eat together. Don't let the kids get up late if they're used to getting up at the same time, at earlier times every day. Keep the rituals as much as you can because that's what they need. They need structure, they need schedules, and then they'll feel safer. And I think that's so very important. I think communication is huge. Make sure you're talking about it. This is, you could sit down at the table and talk about, well, I heard this on the news today, or I heard this, some kid was talking about this, or, ask them questions about their day and listen to their emotions about it. And, I'm going to plug the Imagine Project again, but um, writing your Imagine story as a family about this whole scenario is so powerful. And in 10 years, you can look back and read those Imagine stories and hear, remember what's in your heart, but writing them is huge. I would love to read you an Imagine story of a
Yeah,
second year about COVID.
absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely. That'd be
really.
amazing.
Her name is Hope, and she's a second grader, and she's just very wise. So imagine leaving school one day and not knowing that would be the last day of school for the year. Imagine having to complete schoolwork every day at home, not being able to hear your friends' laughter, voices, or even your teacher telling you to shush while doing the waterfall hand motion. Imagine looking outside your bedroom window at the sky, wondering when the next time you will be able to give your friends and teachers a hug. Imagine you had a sense of hope. Imagine you had a sense of thankfulness, thankful for current technology and being able to see your friends and teachers over the computer screen. Imagine spending more time with your family than ever before, discovering new activities and playing games with each other. Imagine you had a superpower to change anything in the world and you choose to cure all disease. Imagine the world healthy and strong, getting to see your friends and teachers again. Imagine there's no pain, no worry, no strife in the world. Imagine everyone living with happiness and joy. So
Mm.
that's through the eyes of a second grader.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be very different for every age and every, different, how different people experience it. But to be able to express it is huge and very, very important. So I would say give every opportunity you can, talk about it. Use the Imagine format if you need to, but speak your truth about it. And don't be afraid to tell your kids how you feel. They need to know
Yeah.
it's real. They need to know you're real. Don't hide it.
No, no, absolutely. That's that temptation because up until a certain age, you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof,
Oh,
fearless,
yeah.
right? And it's hard, I think, especially for guys, to let go of that,
Mhm.
to allow your kids to see that you're vulnerable sometimes and scared sometimes.
Right.
But everything I've read, everything I've heard says that it's so much better to show them, hey, I'm scared, and this is what I'm doing about that.
Yeah.
You know?
If they know my dad was scared and this is what he did, then they mimic that. They
Yeah.
can have a reference point to help themselves once they face a similar situation. Something I love to do, that I used to drive my kids nuts. My kids are adults now, but we used to do the gratitude game. So
Mm.
if somebody was not in a very good mood or struggling with something or had a rough day, we take turns saying what we're grateful for. You have to do at least 3 rounds before somebody starts to shift, because somebody will be sitting in the back seat saying, "I don't have anything I'm grateful for." but you kind of, nudge them along, and then everybody else starts to saying some things, and they're like, okay, and then they come up with things. So I love the gratitude game to
Mhm.
kind of shift the perspective sometimes in
Mhm.
helping to change moods and move forward.
Well, you mentioned in passing earlier that there's been substantial research in the last 10, 15 years that we're as certain as one can be with neuroscience that, yeah, just now talking about it literally changes your mindset, changes the hormone load, it changes even the pathways in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
it's immensely powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, You know, um, I'm thinking of two stories. One story is this little boy,
Mhm.
his name is, we'll call him Billy. And
Mhm.
he he was at a fifth grade classroom, and he had lost his dad when he was 2, and had moved around quite a few times, like 5 times in his short lifetime. And he
A lot of
came,
change.
yeah, and he came into this school, and he was real quiet because he'd moved so many times. He was afraid, and
Mhm.
the kids thought he was a little strange. And then he stood up in front of the entire fifth grade. They were all grouped together in the library, and they read their imagined stories. And he read
Mhm.
the story about having lost his dad and about having to move so many times. And do you know, those kids rallied around him? They
Mhm.
rallied around him, and they didn't just become his friends for 2 days, they became his friends for the rest of the year. And so that being heard changed the trajectory of that child's life. And
Mhm.
so important to be heard, and to be heard, in a family setting. And I've had parents tell me, I thought I communicated really well with my child, about our divorce. But then when he wrote a story about how he felt going back and forth between homes,
Mhm.
I really saw what was going on. So giving him the opportunity to really express something that was, in his heart, was really huge. So I think
Mhm.
in all scenarios that's important. There's another story of a sixth grader who I walked into a classroom. This is done, and I encourage this to be done in a classroom too. And it's meant for teachers to take it and do in their classroom, but sometimes I go in and do it myself.
Mhm.
So I walked into a sixth grade classroom, and I asked, so who here likes to write? And this boy stood up and threw his paper down. He said, I hate to write. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, okay, well, let's try it. And so I don't push him, I don't make him. And he saw everybody else writing, and he started writing. And he really got into the Imagine format. So he started writing, he's writing like crazy. And he stood up when it was all over, because I invite everybody to share, and he read a story about losing his dad. It was really,
Mhm.
and he didn't cry, but he was so proud at the same time, of his dad.
Mhm.
And he read the story, and then at the end, and the kids just gathered around him and hugged him and made him feel so
Mhm.
accepted. He was kind of the class clown, I would say, a little bit.
Mhm.
And at the end, I said, so, any feedback? And he said, oh, I love to write. I love
Aw.
to write now. And it's because he found his voice. And
Mhm.
giving kids a voice, giving them a chance to be heard, is just
Mhm.
so huge, because you never know what story they're going to tell. Trust me, the stories I hear are huge. So many kids have, you know, stress, trauma,
Mhm.
whatever. It can be really small, it can be really huge, but it can be really meaningful to anybody,
Mhm.
to them particularly.
And it sounds like this process gives them something to do specifically. It gives them the instructions of little signposts along the way to guide them through this in a way that could create a habit that can serve them all the way into adulthood and parenthood and grandparenthood themselves.
Absolutely. That's what I want it to be, as a tool
Mhm.
that they can use
Mhm.
throughout their lifetime. Oh, that's right. I remember that Imagine project. I can write down, and every day learning to write your imagines. It's huge. It really transforms how you see your day. So yeah, it's a tool for a lifetime.
Fantastic. So Dan, want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing this amazing project. And before we go, though, you've done a number of talks, you've been around the country, you've spoken in schools, this is not your first interview. What is something that you wish people asked you about more so you can talk about it?
That's a good question. I wish people asked me more about nutrition.
Mm,
Nutrition and how it correlates with mental health, because nutrition is much bigger than people understand. And if you see a child that's very hyper, very irritable, just really won't settle down, and you just don't, you're at your wit's end, you don't know what's going on with them, it could very well be something nutritionally that they're eating, that they shouldn't be eating, that they're deficient in. So I would say explore that option. And, it can even cause sadness. Sugar is huge. Sugar is way overused in our country, and sugar can cause a lot of imbalances in the system and can cause a lot of mental health issues. So I would say, look into eating healthier if you want to keep your kids balanced. So not always easy to do, but important.
Yeah, it's the less attractive cousin to so many other self-care things.
Exactly.
One of my jokes, it's not a joke, is about how, viewers know I have an extensive martial arts background, but I'm a middle-aged parent. A mugger's not going to get me. Self-defense for me at this point is not kicking and punching. It's eating fewer cheeseburgers and getting a good jog in, because it's not a mugger going to get me. It's a heart attack.
Right.
And
eat more vegetables.
yes, exactly. And that nutrition aspect for mental health is another thing that we're just now beginning to really understand.
Yes.
How very important it is and how much influence just changing from Fruity Pebbles to a bagel sandwich for breakfast
or a healthy
can do.
some sort of granola that or egg or something, even something, a smoothie with lots of fruit in it that tastes sweet, but then throw some lettuce in there and they don't even know it, or part of an avocado, something like that. And training them to enjoy the natural versus the synthetic flavors, because we get addicted to that as synthetic flavor, and it's hard to break, but you can. So
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I'm note to self, go find a guest to cover nutrition for kids. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and we'll put links to all of this in the show notes for everybody. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you everybody for watching. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
Thank you. Today's episode was brought to you by our heroes over at Patreon: Todd Elner, Beth Edwards, Douglas Sedevy, Hugh O'Donnell, Art Brick, American Institutes of Kenpo, Beth Pratt, Richard Hubbard, Wayfinder Advantage, Kit Bradley, Lee Douglas, Amy Rivers, Neil Fastine, Kate Carlson, Ron Payton, Jenny Coakley, and Chris Jordan. Join the illustrious heroes by backing us at patreon.com/safestfamily. If you can't, that's okay, but do consider liking us and subscribing here on YouTube or sharing your favorite episodes on social media. Even a little bit on your end can make a lot of difference here. Thank you for watching today. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.